Hello, students. My name is Professor Benavides, and I want to talk about file processing techniques inside of Python. We're also going to talk about exception handling, the exception handling mechanism. Now, as far as file processing techniques in Python, that's not the only thing that it can do. It can also handle JSON, that is the JavaScript object notation, as well as binary files. But everybody starts with text files. So a text file is just a sequence of characters. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and do a simple little demo of opening a file, closing a file. I guess I'll call it the old-fashioned way without the with statement. And then we'll throw in the with statement, to go ahead and open the file, because basically what it does is it avoids resource leaks. The with statement allows us to open the file and close the file. Whereas in the good old days, you had to remember to go ahead and put in another statement to close it. And so sometimes you would forget that, and that might end up with problems in processing along the way. So let me go ahead and start up Sublime. And as far as Sublime is concerned, I have dual screens that opened up in a separate window. So let me go ahead and move it into the current window. So let me go ahead and just do our current little demo now. When you open files and you save and then you read, it assumes that they're pretty much in the same folder unless you set a path. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and set up a little folder first when I save my file. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to go put this on the desktop. And I create a folder by just clicking on New Folder, and I'm going to call it File Processing. How's that? You can go ahead and call it lab10 underscore and then your username, But for my purposes here, I'm just going to go ahead and create the file, the folder, double click on it to open it. And I'm going to go ahead and just call this file test underscore test.py. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and, I don't necessarily have to do it, but it comes in handy to go ahead and assign the file name to a variable, a string variable. So I'm going to just call this demo file dot, and we'll add the extension txt because it is a text file. Remember, a text file processing is what we're going to be doing, and that involves the text file is a sequence of characters. So first thing we're going to do is open up the file. Typically, we'll do something like this. You can go to W3 Schools to get some this kind of code. So we'll go ahead and open a file, in this case, file name, right? And I'm going to go ahead and use mode gets W. And you can just put in the W there. I like to be very explicit here and put in mode gets W, or you can just put in a W with these single quotes. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and write something to this. So F is an object, dot write is a method. So I'll then go ahead and then say something like, whoops, I have deleted the contents. And basically that's what happens with the write. If there was a file already that existed called demo.file.txt or demo underscore file.txt, it'll override it and put, whoops, I have deleted the file in it. Now, so I open the file, put something in it with the write method, and there's other methods that we can use, and then I go ahead and close it. Okay. All right, so if I run this, it says finished. I could just go use the file manager, get over there. We're going to do a file open though, and I'm going to see that my file is there, and I'm going to just put it into the, see there it says, whoops, I have deleted the contents. That's because this is open in write mode. Remember, there's several other ones. Remember the append mode. So if I run this one like this, and then go look at my file, see how it's appended the next one. Notice how there's no carriage return on there. So if if I'm going to be doing append type stuff, I'm going to have to go ahead and do something like this, so that did I get have deleted the contents? I have deleted the contents. Did I get that? It didn't seem like it worked, did I? Let's see here. It wrote it, and it didn't go to the next line. So I'm at a loss. Let's see now. Let's try that again one more time. And come over here. Oh yeah, it did. Why didn't I see that? See that? See how let me run that again one more time. Why I just didn't see it. Had to be. I'm going to do a Control B, and I wrote another line to it, and it should put a carriage return or a new line. See how this says? If you don't put that /n on there, you're going to be going left to right. So it's going to be saying, "Oops, I deleted the contents." Oops, I deleted the contents. And see how the sentences were like stuck together, so it was throwing my eyes, on here. So if I put it back on read mode, or excuse me, write mode, we'll talk about read in just a minute, and run it again, we're going to go ahead and see that everything that was there, the contents are gone, and I'm back to just that one statement. Okay, so hopefully we've mastered that. And usually I like to put my open or my the writing to the file in one file, and the opening and reading from that file in a separate file. But for the sake of demonstration, I'm just going to go ahead and continue here with this, and I'm just going to say open and file name. And in this case, we're going to have, it's going to be mode gets read. Okay, and let's try just one command on here, which would be like, say for example, print, and let's say print f.read, and this should read the whole darn thing, and then I'm going to close the file. And then we're going to contrast this with the with statement. I think you got to learn it this way before you go to the with. You got to, in order to appreciate what the with statement does for us, is that it opens it, does everything it needs to get done, and then closes the file, so you don't have to be messing with all this stuff here. So let me do a Control B, and it ends up reading the content. So basically, what happens here is I write in to this file, demo_.txt, demo_file.txt, and then it closes it. And then I open it in read mode, and I read the whole thing, right? So I could, there's different ways of reading it in. We could use loops, we could use all kinds of stuff, but for right now, this is just the basic idea that I wanted to go ahead and cover with you. So now let's talk about the application that I'm going to develop a little bit more. Now the application I'm going to develop here is going to be grades, and so we're going to write some grades to a file, and the grades are on a student. So we're typically going to have student ID, student name, and then their grade. And so that's going to be written to a file. And then what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to open that up. And I want to go ahead and unpack this information into some tokens for ID, name, and grade. So I won't be able to just use a read that reads the whole darn thing. I've got to separate it into some little parts so that I can add up all the grades and compute the average. And I'm going to throw in on top of all this the Python exception handling mechanism, which what we'll do is we'll use exception handling here to make sure that if we have an error, the program just doesn't crash crazy. So we'll test for things like, the file's not there, that's about the only one I can test for. We can throw in a generic one if we want. Other things that we can test for that I can't experience right now would be permissions. Let's say that you don't have permission for that particular folder, and if you're trying to read or write from it, you're going to get an error. It's going to crash. Or what if the file is not closed properly, right? So there might be some problems in with not using, if you haven't used the with statement to help us with this maintenance, so that there isn't any kind of memory leak, during the execution of the program. So exception handling is really important for files, but guess what? Exception handling can be used in many applications. It's a finishing topic, basically anytime a program crashes, that's not good. You want to create applications where the application will exit gracefully and the user doesn't get a bad impression about your program. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get rid of these two little starter little demo thingies. And let's just start with writing to the file, because you got to write to the file before you can go ahead and read from the file, unless you want an error message. So we're going to use the with statement in this particular case, and it does two things for us. It opens the file and closes the file. This avoids resource leaks. So it's a very, very big plus that we're going to be seeing. So let's just go ahead and start off by saving the file. And I'm going to go File, Save As. I'm going to save it to the same folder. I'm going to go ahead and call this, let's filegrades, file underscore grades underscore write, because I'm going to be writing. .py, don't forget that py. All right, so I'm going to start off by putting in the name of the file. I like to use the variable name. Excuse me, a variable for the file. That way I can use it rather than not having to spell it out. And that's kind of handy if you're using it several times. They're normally only going to use it once, but a lot of times what happens is that you keep adding to a program, so it makes maintenance easier if you just have this, designated at the top. So now I'm going to go ahead and use my with statement. So I'll say with open, and I'm going to go ahead and use that file name. And the mode I'm going to use is write mode, right? And here's we put the object at the end here as grades. So the file object is going to be referred to as grades, rather than, remember that little demo I showed you earlier? I used F for the name of the object. Well, now it's going to be grade. So instead of saying, f.write, it would be grades.write, So I'm going to press enter right here, and now I'm in the suite. Now this works because I put in that colon. Remember, suite is like practically the same thing as a block of code. So that everything that I write right now, every line that I write is going to be part of this, with statement. So I'm going to say grades.write, open parenthesis, and I'll put in my first student. And you can put in any kind of student ID and name that you want, but you may want to use the grades that I put in so you can verify that you got the right average with mine. And so you can use any grade. I'm going to use just last name because I don't want to go crazy with like first name, middle name, all that kind of stuff. So whatever names you want to go ahead and use is fine with me. Remember that we got to put in that \n, otherwise it doesn't show up. Okay, so if the file if the file opens, it's going to be referred to as grades. If the file opens, right? So then we're going to go ahead and use write statements. The write statement expects a string to output to the file. And the \n is a new line escape code that moves the line to the next character. Okay. So I'm not going to do any exception handling on this one. We'll do the exception handling on the reading part, but you may not have permissions to write to this folder if you're on a network or network administrator hasn't given you permissions, on that, so I'm just going to do a Control C, Control V, and just do something like, 222, and then the next name, and maybe this is too much trouble. And then we'll do this one, we'll do an 80 for this one. Okay. And we'll do another string here. And guess what? We'll do 333. And we'll use another grade. Don't forget the \n. Grades is the name of the object. We're using the object.method syntax here. Kind of compulsive on here. And \n. Last one. And we'll use AS555 and then Ramirez. And this would be a 50. Okay, so I've got this done. Let me go ahead and do a Control B to run this. And it says it's finished. If I want to open it up, I can go ahead and go File, Open File, and open up grades. And there it is. It did work, right? So there's my text file. Notice how I did give it the TXT extension, because it is a text file is a string of a sequence of characters. That's what text files are. Python can handle, as I mentioned here, JSON, which is very popular and more professional, which is the JavaScript, object notation, as well as binary files, which would be like images and videos and things like that. Okay, so I'm finished with this, and I proved that it did work. So now I'm going to go ahead and go on to reading. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create another file here. I'm not going to do it like in the little demo. So we'll go File, New File, and then I'll go File, Save As. And I'm going to go ahead and call this file underscore grades underscore read. This is a method to my madness.py. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to go ahead and build my application. Now, I'm going to go ahead and build it without the exception handling. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the exception handling. Now, when you add the exception handling to it afterwards, then you're going to have to like maybe do some cut and paste and stuff like that. Well, for right now, let's just start off with the file name. And I'm going to use the same file name, grades.txt. And as I mentioned, I'm going to not only read the information in, but I'm going to perform some processing. But let me just take it in steps, right? Just take it in steps. So we'll start with the with statement. This is the with open, and that's the file name. Mode, it's read. And then as grades. Don't forget that colon, because without that colon, if you press enter, it's going to go all the way to the left-hand side, and you're going to be getting indentation errors. So the with statement works. This with statement is going to work only if the file exists. And we're going to end up putting this in a try. I guess I'll use the word block. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and experience the error first before I start looking for it. I want to see the trace back so that I can see what kind of exceptions I need to be catching. So if the file doesn't exist, you're going to get an exception. And there's different ways to do this without having to delete the file. You could just rename the file up there at the top to perform a test for a file that doesn't exist because you're spelling it differently. So inside of this with statement, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to print like a little header. And this little header, I'm going to introduce some new ideas here. And it's not real difficult. It's a little formatting. And it's basically going to use some placeholders to put in the header line for the report. And I'm going to go ahead and give each field a width of 10. And I'm going to left align the first two fields and right align the third field for grades. I'll show you how that's done. It's really not that bad. So we'll do an F string. And in the F string, we'll put in our first placeholder, right? And in this first placeholder, I'm just gonna put in ID. In the second, I'll put in I'll go ahead and format it later. In the second placeholder, I'm going to go ahead and put in name. And in the third placeholder, I'll put in grade. Okay. So now I've got these placeholders, and it's just, it's strings, right? If I want to format these, I'm going to go ahead and put in a colon right after the string that says, hey, I'm going to format that, and I'm going to make it left aligned in a field of 10. Second one, same idea. Left aligned in a field of 10. The next one on here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and left align it in a field of 10. No, not left align it. I'm going to right align this last one. So that would be colon, and instead of we'll use, this is how you would then right align that. So that's 30. 10, 10, 10, that's 30. And then so beneath it, if I want to print a little separator line, I can go ahead and count out 30 of these. So that's 30 of them, I hope. And that'll equal to the 10 fields up above on there. So now I'm ready for my loop. Okay? So it's going to print out the student's ID, the name, and the grade, and they're going to be in fields of 10. That would, and now I'm ready to go ahead and put in my loop. So I'm going to say for, and remember, I'm not going to be able to just write out the whole file. I need to go ahead and get pieces. I need to get the ID, I need to get the name, I need to get the grade. Why? Because I need to get the grade, convert it to a number. I need to go ahead and compute the average. Okay? So I'm going to need to go ahead and use the split method on that particular piece. So let's just say for record in grades. So grades is the name of the file, right? It's the file object. So for each one of these lines, what do I want to do? I want to go ahead and I want to iterate through the file object. I want to split this string up and unpack it into the tokens of ID, name, and grade. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and say student ID. That's what I'm going to call it. Comma, name. This is what I'm going to unpack them to, these tokens, right? And so we'll say record.split. Okay. And I'm going to come back and do my processing of the grades later. Let me just do this in a real simple kind of way so I can go ahead and get some output, and I'll come back and doll it up a little bit. So now I want to go ahead and print out a detail line of the student, so I can say print, And now I can go ahead and use an F string with those placeholders of student ID, name, grade. Okay, so this is going to be, the first placeholder is going to be student ID. All right, I put it in the wrong place. I should have been inside the little placeholder. There we go. It would be student ID. Nope. I was trying to use the down arrow. Let's try that again. Right, student ID. All right, and in the student ID, I'm going to go ahead and make this left aligned. Same thing as above, right? I'm going to go ahead and make it a left align 10. Right, and it should come out just fine. It's going to be beautiful. Hopefully, you can picture it in your head. I've got 3 fields. They each have a width of 10 each, and the first 2 are left aligned. The last one's right aligned. Okay, so now we're going for name. And this is going to be left aligned 10. Let's try this again. So it'd be name, colon, left align 10. All right, so let's go on to the next one on here. We're going to put in another placeholder where we'll go ahead, and then this would be grade, and this would be a right align 10. All right. And I'm missing my, see that double quote on here? It's a good thing I noticed it. I don't know how that ended up over there, but it should, on the F string, it should be at the very, very end. Right? It should be, or it should be right here, right? So I don't know how I did that, but see, here's my F string, right? And in the F string, I've got, and that's why that color wasn't coming out right. So it was getting that feedback, and it wasn't coming out right here. So the next line that I want to put in here is, I'm going to press enter, and back one, I'm going to say print. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that separator line again, but I'm going to show you how an easier way to do that. I'm just going to put in 1 equal sign, and then this is kind of cute. Just multiply that times 30, and it's going to go ahead and do that all the way across. So that's pretty much what we're going to be doing. That's pretty much it. The rest of it's all dolling it up, getting the numbers, doing the exception handling, all that other kind of good stuff here. So let me go ahead and run this. And I got a syntax error here. Let's go ahead and figure this out. This syntax error, look at the trace back here. It's on line 4, and it says ID. Okay. So it doesn't like that on line 4. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. Invalid syntax. Okay. So let's see if I can figure it out. Got my F string. And probably because, look at this, you can't be putting double quotes and double, this is a really important thing inside of Python, is that it gets confused when you use inside double quotes with outside double quotes. You can do it either way you want, So the outside has got to have single quotes, and then the inside can then have the double quotes, right? Or you could do it reverse, right? Probably. So let's try it again, and it worked. Now I don't think I got my count correct on the just right on the on here for the line here. It seems like it works fine, but my inside here, I'm not really sure why. Oh, you know why? Look at this. See how I'm off by 1. That's 30 and 30, but I'm off by 1 right here. Now I'm looking at my detail line on line 8, and look at this. I added a space right in there. So I'm going to get rid of that little space. I mean, you're not getting an error message on this other than you got to be really compulsive for this, right? So I'm going to get rid of that line and then run it again, and now I'm all in line. Okay. So as you can see, what I did is on line 4, I printed that header line, and then I printed this equal signs all the way across, and then I showed you how you can do it the shorthand way on line 9. Okay, so now we've got the data. We haven't done the section handling yet, but it's important to, I think it's important to build incrementally. Like you may not have noticed that little extra little space on here. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and do the processing that I want to go ahead and get the grades and compute the average. In order to do that, I've got to get a counter and a sum so I can go ahead and determine the average. Okay, so I already know that I need to have these initialized up at the top, so I'm going to go ahead and put in count grades, and I'm going to initialize that to 0, and then I'm going to have a sum grades variable, and I'm going to initialize that to 0 as well. All right, so now I can come inside of here, and I can have my counter and my accumulator. Okay, so what happens is you have to understand that this is a string of characters, right? That's inside the text file. If I want to work with this in terms of numbers, I've got to convert that string into an int. So remember that old story? We got to go ahead and convert it. So where is that going to happen? Well, right after that split, I still have the string. So what I want to do is I want to get that grade. I'll use the same. I want to get that grade and use the int function on it to convert it to a numeric, to an int. Okay. Then I can go ahead and do my counter and my, and the counters on if you're coming from like C++ and Java, you're going to want to do like, count grades count underscore grades plus plus. There's no plus plus in Python, so we'll say count grades. We could do plus equals 1 probably, but I'm going to just do it the old-fashioned way, which is this is my counter. And then I'll do my accumulator, which is sum grades is equal to sum grades plus grade. So this will sum the grades, right? So now I'm ready to go ahead and compute my, let me go ahead and well, I should print this. So underneath here, I'll go ahead and then say print. I'll have an F string, number of grades. Number of grades, colon, and since I'm using an F string, I'll go ahead and use the placeholder, and I'll put count grades in there. Okay, so it'll show the number of grades. Then underneath here, I'll go ahead and do another print statement, and I'll say the average. I'll do another F string, right? And I'm going to put in a placeholder, and I'm going to go. This is I could have divided those two, put it into a variable and passive variable. I'm just going to go ahead and do the math right here. That would be sum grades divided by count grades, right? That will give me the average, right? I want to format this to 2 decimal places. I'll say, hey, I want to format this with a colon and a dot to F. This will give me 2 decimal places. So let me go ahead and run this and see what I get. So I have 5 grades, and I get a 70. Okay. And notice how I use the grades that I use were very simple so that I could visually see what the average is correct. It is a 70. I mean, I can visually see it. That's right in the middle there, right? And I formatted just in case you use different numbers. I use these numbers so that I can mathematically attest that those grades are correct, you know, without having to get a calculator. And I do get calculator to prove things out. And what were to happen here if this file doesn't exist? So one way you could do this without having to delete the file called grades is just change the name of the file. Let's see what happens now. Whoa, that looks good, right? Let's look at the traceback. We know what it says, but what it will say. Traceback. On line 6 is where the error happened when they were trying to do the open as grades. File not found error. No such file or directory exists. Grades.x. This is my hint for my exception handling. It's not my hint. That's what I need to go ahead and test for. The other things that could possibly happen if you're on a network is that I can't test for is permissions. Let's say that you're trying to read and write into a folder that you don't have permission for, you're going to get a different kind of error. You know, what if the file's not closed? If it's still open, you're going to get a different kind of error. Okay, so for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it back there and run it again just to make sure it's running right before I start going and do my exception handling routine. Okay, inside of Python. And it's a little bit different from other languages. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do I'm going to do the structure down over here, and then I'm going to do cut and paste. And we're going to have to do some indentation as well. So basically, you understand that if the file doesn't exist, you get an exception. We want to handle that. We want to catch, using a word from my Java days, right? The exception called, or handle the exception called file not found error. Okay. The other ones that could possibly happen are permissions and the file not closed, right? And something very unique to Python is that it has an else clause. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a try, and in that try, I'm going to try something, and I'm going to add the file not found error exception, and I'm going to throw in the generic exception, and then I'll have the else. And the way the else works is I'll say it weird, is that the else executes only if no exception occurs. Okay, so that's where I'm going to have my output. All right, so I'm going to start off with my try. Let me build my structure here. I'm going to have my try, and then I'm going to go ahead and have my first exception. I can catch multiple exceptions, but for right now, this is good enough. So we're going to have the file not found error colon. And this is going to be my first exception. If I could, if I'm still thinking in Java, it's except. And then we'll have the generic except. And then we'll have the else. Okay? So I already know that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put these two things inside my else. So that's a cut and a paste. Hopefully I'm doing the indentation correctly. And inside of the except, I'll just say print, and I'll say something like an error has occurred. Why not say something like this? Please see admin. Okay. You know, this one here on the line 23, it's I guess you could call it generic. You know something happened, you don't know what it is that happens. That's why you could just say an error has occurred. To whereas this one here, you know exactly what happened. The file is not found. So I can provide much more specific feedback here and provide a formatted string and say something like sorry, the file, and put in a little placeholder, which is file name. And that's where it comes in handy to do what I did there. Is if you're going to use it in several ways as the program grows, instead of having to remember what you call the file, just put it into a variable name, and then you can just use it like this. Does not exist. Period. Okay. All right. So I have all this built. So the only thing I need to do is get that try block. I mean, the everything inside of this, you know, that I want to put in. I want to whatever I want to get inside the try. So I'm going to do a Control X and pop it right in here. Now I've got to pay really close attention to indentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this whole thing. See how it, and then I'm going to press the Tab key. See how everything is indented properly now? Okay. So I don't need all this white space here, so I'm going to get rid of that white space. And I'm going to look at from top to bottom again. So the first thing I see at the top is I designate my file name. I go ahead and specify my counters. I try my what I need to try. Notice how the indentation is proper. It's indented once, and inside here it's indented once, because you know white space is really important, you know, for Python. The white space designates the block, right? The block of code. So inside this for loop, I need to have that indented. Otherwise, it won't know that all of this is part of that loop. So here I have my first exception, my generic exception, and then if everything goes okay, then we'll have processing. Because remember, I've never really seen the else clause other than in Python. The else clause executes only if no exception has occurred. All right, so let's go ahead and run this and see if I don't have any exceptions. All right, it ran, and all that worked so that we can have exception handling, okay? So, and you want to put this in at the end. It's a finishing topic, right? I wanted to experience that error so that I could know what exception to catch. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add the little X on here. And I'm going to run it again. So it's in other words, that file doesn't exist, right? And now it says, sorry, the file grades x.txt does not exist. So what happened here was that when it was trying to open this file name, it stopped right there. Nothing got done after that. So you don't have all those error messages coming up and it getting all confused, trying to do stuff that it doesn't know what to do with. And this clause right here executed. The file not found error exception fired, right? Then control goes to the end of the program. It does not go to else. If the file was found, it'll go ahead and do everything inside the try, and then if that's successful, then it comes over here to the else and finishes off. It's a little bit different than from, like, for example, in Java, you have it all, there's no else clause. So it's all done within the try block. Okay. So I'm going to take it back to running successfully. And that's how you test it. I mean, you could delete the file, but this is it's easier to just change the file name this way. So here's my output. And it looks okay. Let's do verify. I've got ID, name, grades. Everything's aligned correctly. I don't have any off. Those, number of grades 5. The average is 70, and it's formatted properly. I don't see anything wrong with it right now. Okay, so that is my version of file processing techniques. And I zeroed in on working with text files, which are a sequence of characters. And I made a demonstration of using the open statement alone versus the with statement, which incorporates the closing of the file automatically. So in other words, I do not have to write that extra line of code to close the file. The with statement does what it needs to do and then closes it. And this, helps us deal, with, problems of leakage, that you may encounter in your program. But other than that, I don't have anything else for you. Hopefully you learned something from my presentation.